Okay, hello everybody. I am Sillysuper. Um, this is my first video. Please be kind to me. I might stumble over a few words because I'm not the best at speaking and reading at the same time. So, yeah. This is my first video. Please be kind. If you want to comment, please be kind to me. Anyway, this is my first video, so let's get straight into it without further ado. Let's start reading. Okay? This is a one-shot called This Number is Out of Service, right? By a tired and dead writer. A tired and dead writer. Yeah. Um, let's see. There is the creator chose not to use archive warnings, so that is. But let's just read some of the major tags. Okay? This is a villain Izuku fic, so. But anyway, let's read the summary. Midoriya Izuku reacted a little differently to the roof incident when he leaves a voicemail expecting it to go nowhere. It ends up with Shigaraki Tomura. A voicemail about All Might and a quirkless kid who had been broken by society. Perhaps Midoriya Izuku was something to offer the League, and perhaps Shigaraki Tomura goes to find out. Leave a message at the beep. Hey Dad. Izuku sniffled, trying not to cry. It had been a long time since Izuku had called his father's number. Well, his old number. He'd stopped answering by the time Izuku was 7. I met All Might today, Izuku said into the phone. He's not everything I thought he was. He's just like everyone else. He said I couldn't be a hero. Izuku broke off. He didn't know why he was using the phone number as a sort of diary, leaving his voicemails like they'd go anywhere, but he did it anyway. He's weak, too. Thought he was so strong, so perfect, but he's been hurt badly. He asked me not to tell anyone, but I feel like I can't just keep it all inside. He made me promise it was our secret. Izuku laughed a little and realized tears were streaming down his face. It's the first secret I've ever been trusted with. You know, everybody hates me. And now I can say All Might is just like the rest of them. Isn't it funny? Funny. No. Isn't that funny? Before he knew it, Izuku was sobbing. He held the phone away from his face, placing it in his lap as he tightened his grip on it. And he laughed through his choked cries. He left me here, Izuku whispered. He didn't know if the mic picked it up, but he didn't particularly care. It's not like the message was going anywhere. The number was a dead end. Izuku had accepted that years ago. He saved me from a villain, crushed my hopes and dreams, and then he just left me on this roof. Izuku couldn't help it. He stared at the edge, looking at the low fence that would be so easy to climb over. Too easy. Kachan told me to kill myself, Izuku said quietly, his tears slowing. He told me to jump off a roof and pray for a quirk in my next life. Wouldn't that be easier? All my life, I've been beaten down and ignored. And for what? Being quirkless? I'm more than just a freak with no quirk. Izuku still had his phone in his lap, and he felt like throwing it as his voice picked up until he was shouting. Izuku leaned forward and wished anyone was listening. I'm good at too many things, Izuku screamed, voice cracking painfully. I can analyze fights so quickly. I know who will win before it's over. I can remain calm under pressure, even when I'm scared. And today, I lied. I lied to All Might's face, and told him I was fine. He didn't suspect a thing. And if that's not talent, I don't know what is. Izuku slumped, rocking back on his heels, and clutched the phone to his chest. I know he'll never get these messages, Dad, but that's okay. Izuku wiped his face and pressed the phone back to his ear. He smiled into the wind and tried not to let his voice break again. Even though you abandoned us, Mom kept your last name, Midoriya. Ironic, because of the green hair. Anyway, I'm sorry I keep calling you when I know there's nobody to answer. Goodbye. Izuku hung up and then just stared at the number on the screen as it flashed for a moment, indicating that it had indeed been ended. He let his hand fall to his lap, and he just sat there. His tears had stopped, and his breathing had regained its rhythm, but he didn't move. His legs felt like jelly, and his head spun a little. He didn't know how long he sat on the roof, just sitting and staring blankly at the railing, but eventually he stood and walked down the steps of the building, almost mechanically. The walk home was uneventful. Izuku trudged along the sidewalk, clutching his backpack strap in one hand and his notebook in his other. The backpack rhythmically hit his back as his feet hit the pavement, and his hand tightened on the strap so the single strap over his shoulder wouldn't slip. Izuku knew he wouldn't have the mental capacity to pick it up if it fell off. When he reached home, his mother wasn't there. She hadn't returned from work yet. Faintly, Izuku knew that was a good thing. She wasn't there to kick up a fuss or cry over his grime-covered uniform or the scrapes on his face. There were more under his clothes and bruises to top it all off, but she wouldn't have been able to see those anyway. Means she wouldn't worry about them either. She never worried. about anything unless it was obvious, or she suddenly decided to be a good mother. The latter hadn't happened in years. Izuku took a shower to wash off the slime in his hair and rubbed at the road burns until all the little pebbles had fallen out and clinked on the metal drain, unable to pass through. Izuku would have picked them up and throw them out eventually. But he didn't have the energy right then. Also, rubbing the road residue from the abrasions made them hurt more, and Izuku reluctantly put plaster over the worst of them. His shoulder. Izuku had forgotten that Kachan had burned his hand into it. The fabric had melted into his skin, which was a pain to remove. Izuku considered giving up at several points during the process, but the thought of the satisfaction it would give the blonde made Izuku finish the job and wrap it properly. By the time it was all done, Izuku was practically dead on his feet and fell into bed. Without a second thought, when his mother got home, she merely smiled at the sight of his serene features completely asleep, and she turned his bedroom light off for him. The next day, Izuku was in the hospital. He wasn't a patient, no, he was a visitor. Something made him visit, though Izuku did not know what it was. Kachan was asleep, with multiple tubes around and poked into him, but the most prominent was the one shoved down his throat. According to the nurses and Izuku's mom, he'd been attacked by a villain the day prior. He'd been swallowed by it, nearly drowned, and the villain was defeated only after Kachan fell unconscious. Hilarious. The hilarious part? It was the sludge villain. Izuku knew all too well the burn in a person's lung as slime is shoved down their throat, gagging them and cutting off all oxygen. The panic of a person's struggles being completely useless, ending in their vision slowly fading to nothing. Except in Izuku's case, he awoke moments later, completely fine, with the number one hero slapping him awake, sitting at his bully's bedside, watching an odd machine breathe for him. Izuku could only think about how much he wished it had killed him. He felt bad for thinking it, but he couldn't help it. Sure, Kachan had survived, but imagine he didn't. No more explosions, no more burns, no more sharp words that left Izuku stinging far longer than the scrapes and bruises. Eventually, Izuku couldn't take it anymore. He walked out of the hospital before he could do something he'd regret. It had been 3 days since Izuku's pitiful meeting with All Might, and he didn't feel any better about it. His mother believed it was Kachan's little accident on the same day, but Izuku knew the truth. He also knew the truth about the hatred festering inside him. Izuku wasn't paying attention on his way home from school, but he noticed when a shadow kept flashing in the corner of his eye. After getting about halfway home, Izuku stopped. Stop following me. Ew. Stop following me, Izuku said, looking down at the concrete and clutching his notebook to his chest. I know you're there. You've been watching me since I left school. Just leave me alone. There was a silence that followed, and Izuku took a deep breath. When nothing happened, he blew it out in a deep sigh. And he continued on his way without the shadow behind him. But it wasn't the last he saw of it. The shadow followed Izuku to and from school every day for the next week, and Izuku grew increasingly paranoid the longer the stalking went on. On the 9th day of being watched, Izuku came up with a plan. He took an unusual route home, one he didn't take often, but one he knew like the back of his hand from running through it so very many times when Gachon thought tag and explode was a fun game back in primary school. Taking the turns expertly, Izuku went in a wide circle. When he lost sight of the shadow behind him, he sprinted full force around 2 corners and over a dumpster to get behind it. He didn't see it, and he realized it was a boy in a black hoodie. Izuku barely caught a glimpse before the boy ran off around another corner, and Izuku knew better than to chase him, though, through there. That was the edge of the red zone, which was a bad place to wander into without purpose. Izuku looked after the boy for a moment, then huffed in irritation before turning around and heading home. Unfortunately, his shadow reappeared not even 10 minutes later, right in front of him. Midoriya Izuku. The boy's voice was childish, and when Izuku met his eyes, he shuddered. They were a piercing red, and his face was marred with an odd textured rash. Izuku wondered if it hurt, but more likely it was itchy, since there were nail marks running over his eyes and down his neck. You're my shadow, Izuku breathed, his eyes widening the longer he stared. The boy laughed, and it sounded a little bit manic. I'm Shigaraki Tomura, the boy said with a wide grin. You left me a voicemail? Very interesting voicemail. He held up his phone and pressed a few buttons, but Izuku had already stiffened and knew exactly what Tomura was talking about. Hey, Dad. A small pause. I met All Might today. He's not everything I thought he was. He's just like everyone else. He said I couldn't be a hero. I thought that number didn't go anywhere. Izuku frowned, and Tomura shut off the recording with another grin. You were wrong. You were wrong, he said. Ew, you were wrong, he said. Well, obviously, Izuku muttered. And then he looked back at Tomura with an expression twinged with a bit of fear. Wait, about All Might? I heard what you said, and I'm very interested in what specifically he told you. Tomura laughed. I've been wanting waiting for an opportunity like this, you know? An opportunity like what? Like you. Tomura's eyes were so bright. Izuku couldn't look away. You're exactly what I was looking for. What were you looking for? Izuku asked, stutteringly, torn between taking a step back and leaning closer. A way to destroy All Might. Tomura whispered, I hate him. I'm going to kill him. And you're going to help me. Izuku's mouth fell open. What? Don't you see? Tomura exclaimed, no longer whispering. You said he was injured, which means you know exactly how weak he is. You said you do analysis, and I've watched you scribble endlessly away in those notebooks, but I bet you've thought about how exactly you might go about killing him. I'm not wrong, am I? You know how talented you are. We both do. Izuku's hands tightened on his notebook. You think I'm talented? Of course, Tomura whispered, and Izuku shivered at the sound. Anybody could see it. Didn't you say it yourself? You're more than just a quirkless freak. You're special. You think so? Izuku wasn't even sure what he was doing. The boy in front of him was clearly a villain, but did Izuku care? Absolutely, Tomura grinned. In fact, I'd be willing to give you a new life. Join me, and we can kill All Might together. You never have to go back to that shit show you call a school. Or your house that's always empty because your mother is never home. We'd take very good care of our little analyst. I can promise you that. Izuku was conflicted. He wanted to be a hero, didn't he? Except he hadn't thought about becoming a hero since the roof. He'd given up without even noticing. Replaced by it was depression that buried him in hatred and swallowed him whole. Maybe Tomura could offer him something nobody else could. You wouldn't hurt me? Izuku checked, wary even as he made up his mind. Oh no, you're too valuable a piece. Tomura said it with a crazed grin, but Izuku knew he was being honest. Weird, but honest. Then Izuku took a deep breath. Maybe he was done wishing and pretending he didn't want Kachan dead. Maybe he was sick of thinking up ways to kill All Might with no intention of following through. Maybe he was done pretending to be someone he wasn't. Lead the way. Tomura's smile and swirling purple portal Tomura's smile and a swirling purple portal were the last things Izuku saw before his new life began. OMG, that was so good. That was my first ever video, and it was a one-shot, and I really hope you enjoyed. I'm so sorry if I laughed or coughed or sneezed. I'm so sorry for those 2 sneezes. I did cut them out in time, but, you know, it was kind of weird that I cut out. But, you know, I'm bad at editing, by the way, so if you just hear, like, little snarky remarks. I might just be too lazy to edit them out. Anyway, I really enjoyed this, and I'm so sorry if I messed up a few and repeated a few lines. That's just how my brain reads, because there is typos sometimes, and my brain reads the typo, and then I say it out loud, and then I have to correct it. So yeah, but I really hope you guys enjoyed this, and maybe my next podfic will be a whole lot better. Anyway, bye bye.